The brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp, brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp. The brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the brothers.
Hey everybody,
Wisp.
this
Let's take
is
a ride
Greg
through space
Soul
on this
from
mother-
Texas with the Brothers Wisp number 93. Actually recording this a day early because I've got shenanigans tomorrow. So Mikey was lovely enough. I mean, he's always lovely, but he was lovely enough today to jump in.
How's it going?
Going well, good sir. Where are you at, Mikey?
I'm about an hour west of Chicago.
Chicago, as the locals call it, right?
There's a lot of people that speak kind of funny when you get closer to the city. It's like I think that there's 6 accents in the U.S. I just lump all the southern into one, and then because they just all sound
That
the
sounds
same.
like something a northerner would say.
And then let's see here. So what else? And then New York and Chicago, Boston. There's probably one or two others, and then the rest of us.
Well, I don't know. There's North Dakota. You know, there's
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, you got the the Canadians. What am I saying?
Canadian sort of accent.
Yeah,
The
that's,
Fargo. Oh, don't you know?
yeah. And actually, those actually come down into Wisconsin pretty good ways too.
Oh, there you go. See? And I take offense to you saying everybody in this. So everybody in the South sounds like me, is what you're saying?
No, see, the South, as far as accent wise, I don't think that really even goes into Texas that much because everybody I know from Texas doesn't sound like that.
Well, I've heard it said that there's the South and then there's the Deep South. So the Deep South is kind of over to my right.
Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, up in Kentucky and Tennessee. They
all
all
that stuff.
It's different strengths.
I think that stretches over to North Carolina and stuff too, because JJ's got a pretty thick accent.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome everyone.
This is the brothers'
2-minute
accents.
diatribe. Yeah, there you go. Let's get the dirty work out of the way. There's a guy I know named Dave. He's very calm, collected. He's hard to get worked up. He's hard to get riled up. He never gets fired up about anything. And he runs this company called Pennytone. And if you will bring your business VoIP customers over to him, pennytone.com, ask for Dave, he will give you their first month's bill. He'll write you a check. He will put cash in an envelope and drop it in an unmarked location if you like. But it is the easy button for VoIP deployment. So business customers, all you have to do is send him his way. He will set them up with phones, service, voicemail boxes, IVRs, hunt groups. He will do all of the heavy lifting, and they don't have to think about anything except for pick up their phone and make phone calls. It's really great. Pennycone.com. All right.
And I'd rather say though that outside of Facebook, Dave's pretty even.
Outside of Facebook, yeah, you know how people put their opinions, political affiliations, things like that on Facebook. Facebook again can be in a very emotional place for some folks.
And some people like to throw gas on the fire.
Yeah, and some people like Mike lay traps all over the place, just waiting for people to stumble into them as he steeples his fingers and cackles maniacally. It's you're a flavor of internet troll. I don't know what flavor, maybe Neapolitan, but you're out there for sure. All right, so we have some new patrons, and for you guys that are unfamiliar, which I'm always beating this drum, so you must be familiar. We have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/The Brothers Wisp. This week we have Bill Tyler and Brandon McClelland. Both names I can easily pronounce, but I probably somehow screw those up. But if you jump on a Patreon, you throw us a couple of bones, you get access to the patron-only Slack. And it's a Slack full of channels that are specific to, what do we have? We have a networking one, we have a MikroTik one, we have Ubiquity, we have Cambium, We have general, we have fiber. It's stuff for all kinds of very specific things, so you can kind of really drill down and look for specific pieces of information. You pop stuff in there, all kinds of very smart people, way smarter than me, are going to chime in. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are or inexperienced, you have something value that you can give back to that community. So jump in there. I love it. You guys are my favorite.
Yet there's 46 public channels.
Oh wow.
And then I'm in a couple other ones. I've got one for WISPA members. So we talk about WISPA related stuff.
Oh, that's why I'm not in there. 'Cause I'm not a member.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you are, but you're not with WISPA though.
I got a members only jacket. Does that count? I'm the last member. Let's see. So we beat that drum. Let's move on to a little bit of news. So I perused the Slack and pulled out a few things here and there. I think Mikey's probably got some stuff off the Facebooks, which is Mike anyway. Let's see. MikroTik put out and I'm not sure if this was previously announced. I think I knew this was coming, so it must have been in some form or fashion. But it's a CRS 312. I'm not going to read out the whole model number, but it is a 10 gig copper switch. So it looks like it's got there's 12 copper ports, but 4 of them are combo. So they could be either regular copper or SFP plus interfaces. I don't think there's a street price on this thing yet, is there?
I'll see if there is real quick. But
it's in it's in the CRS 3 series, which uses the good chipsets.
$599 is the list price.
Is that good?
So I don't know. I don't buy 10 gig copper stuff.
I don't either, man. I've never done any of it.
But I guess a 12 port
I assume it's
10 gig switch would for 600. Well, probably $500 really, but
oh yeah, after the discount. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assume that's probably a good price for this sort of thing. I don't know. I've never shot for copper 10 gig.
I don't know if anybody else makes something like Ubiquiti does, because I've got one behind me, but I don't know if anybody else makes, because like most of it you hear these days, it's just all like, it's all big stuff. It's not like, if you want like a 12 port switch, it's 1200 gig ports or something like that. It's not 1210s.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of those manufacturers kind of skip us by.
Yeah, I heard somebody saying that they were interested for a small server cluster. So there you go.
So you do a lot of data center type work. Is 10 gig RJ45 that common?
I don't see it that much. I usually see optical interfaces, to be honest with you. On the carrier side and in cabinets, I usually see optical interfaces on the 10 gig stuff.
Okay. I suppose if you had like a boatload, maybe, but then it seems like even like once you go to but it seems like kind of reverse on itself, because like the big guys, the hyperscale guys, the Googles and Amazons and Facebooks, they're all doing like 25 and 50 and 100 gig type to the server, so they're gonna be doing optical anyway. So I don't know if there's some sort of curve where it's like you're gonna do optical, then you're gonna do RJ45, then you go back. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm sure there's a niche that this was designed to fit into. I'm just not super familiar with it. So be curious if anybody has any thoughts on it.
So I have pulled up what I can find to be the nearest competitor. We have the Unify 6XG PoE. So there's 4 10 gig PoE ports and 2 SFP plus. List price $599.
There you go. So you get a few more ports. Although this thing isn't PoE.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a trade-off. There's more ports, but there's no PoE.
What's that Ubiquiti one designed for? For air fibers?
It's Unify, so I would assume going to like the new Unify switches or the new Unify APs. If it's copper PoE, it's probably going to the new like the HD.
Oh yeah.
Like the high density stadium stuff.
That's much cooking. All right. So while we're talking about MikroTiks, somebody asked the question, what kind of, if I'm going to Fiber Store, what kind of optics would I get for a MikroTik device? I've had really good success with Cisco coated optics, but some people are saying the generics usually work pretty well, but I've never had a problem with Cisco coated optics in a MikroTik router or switch. So I would say look at that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a MikroTik optic compatibility issue at all. I have with some of the obvious stuff. You know, if it wasn't Cisco coded and I put in a Cisco, you know, you gotta do the unsupported transceivers or, you know, whatever.
Right.
But other than that, I think it's pretty. It's been fairly straightforward. I did buy. I haven't used it yet. I haven't taken it out of the box. One of the Fiber Store SFP programmers, because I've got one that it's sort of a compatibility issue in that I'm using BiDis, but the switch doesn't officially support BiDis, so I don't get any of the optic information out of it because it's an unsupported transceiver.
Mm-hmm.
And that model of switch didn't support any BiDis, even factory. You know, I can't get one from Brocade for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try programming it to identify it as just a standard fiber, SFP. Just just tell me you're a regular 10 gig SFP. Don't tell me that you're a BiDi because that stops working. And I don't really. All I would get out of it is knowing what channel it was, but I don't get it anyway. So just get rid of that.
All right, let's see if it works.
But if Fiber Store tells me that it won't work, well, that this switch doesn't support BiDis, so they're not going to give me. So fine, I'll just program it myself.
All right, well, good luck to you. I'd be curious to see how that works out, for sure. So another MikroTik thing is when you go up to 6.45.1, apparently it requires a new version of Winbox, as Cox found out when he upgraded something and then summarily could not connect to it. So upgrade your Winbox really quick. You can just do that right inside of Winbox. It's like boop, update.
And it almost sounds like it's not. It almost sounds like not everybody has had that problem, because like if that was like a hard thing, you think everybody would be talking about it. But I've only heard it a little bit, and like the documentation supports the claim, but it's like I don't know.
Yeah, situational. Who knows? It is above my pay grade, as we like to say. Seems though I'm not really getting paid for this. It's absolutely everything's above my pay grade. But let's see. Last week I talked, or it was 2 weeks ago, last cast, I talked about physically securing MikroTiks, right? So that people couldn't just walk away with them. They were too cheap to really put any expensive solution on there. So what I ended up coming up with through some various recommendations from other people here and there is I put kind of a diagonal hole towards the bottom, just above the power jack. Actually, I set up a jig in my drill press. It's actually still on there. I just hot glued pieces of wood right in the right spots, and so I could just kind of assembly line, throw it on there, drill the hole, pull it off, put another one. I drilled 150 in about 30 minutes, so it didn't really take very long at all. And I'm going to run 16th inch steel braided cable through there and then just crimp an end on it. I'm not even going to bother doing a loop. And then on the other end, I'm going to do a loop with a washer in there, a 1/4 inch washer. And I'm getting some steel zip ties. So if I have to put a screw in, I've got the washer right on that cable, so I can screw it in, hide it. If there's already something there that I can just affix it to where I can't screw it in, I will then use the stainless steel zip tie and kind of blop, 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 and just do it through the loop and leave the washer on there and not worry about it because it's fairly small and inconspicuous anyway. So that's the solution I came up with. I know 328 feet, what is that? 100 meters of the steel cable and 200 crimp ends and the tools to crimp and cut were all less than $90. and then the washers will be about $15. So the whole affair is going to be done for less than $100. So that's fairly inexpensive. Since I'm kind of assembly lining everything, it's going pretty fast to put it all together. So that's what I ended up coming up with. If you guys can come up with a better solution, you let me know for the next go around. Hopefully I don't have to physically secure them next go around. But now I have a system by which I can do that, and it seems like it's going to be fairly, and as somebody was talking about, you know, if they really want it, they could get it off. And it's just it's just for casual protection, because you could grab the thing and rip it and it's going to tear the plastic, but also you're going to lose your deposit if you do that, you know. So it's, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. It's really just to keep honest people honest, I assume, in this scenario. So that's what I came up with. Let's see, what else? I finished migrating one of my data centers, so all of my backbone infrastructure in the Bryan data center are now Cisco ASR 9000s running RSP 440s, and oh my gosh, these things are like butter. It's crazy how fast they converge. So I've got say 3 external ISP connections with an IBGP peer in between, and I can flap the one that's got the 2 connections or the one that's got the single, and I mean, that joker is completely converged. Everything's settled down between both chassis within like 20 seconds to 30 seconds. It's insane. And while it's reconverging, I mean, the router is sawing logs. It's so bored, you know, it's just asleep over there. It's got its mask on, the cucumbers over its eyes, whatever. But it's, I mean, these things are just so smooth. They work so fast. It is crazy dealing with these things. Which kind of blends well with a post that just dropped this afternoon, I think, which was nice with Hootsuite, because I used to just dump, like, as I found stuff, I just dumped it. So, like, we'd have one day where there'd be, like, 30 Brother Swiss posts and then nothing for 3 days. Now I just schedule it up, just does 4 a day. That way I can be lazy and you guys don't notice. But anyway, so I think it dropped this afternoon. I was thinking about the new AMD, server processor. It will do 32 cores, 64 threads. I got to thinking, well, that's a single processor, so if you put duals in, you can do 128 threads. What would that be like on RouterOS v7? You're talking 20 seconds to load all your hardware tables you have. But with v7, it pulls the data in per core, or per peer a peer per core. Yeah. So you could pull in like 63 BGP peers simultaneously with v7 with that server CPU, and then it's an x86 based CPU, so it's going to be fast as hell anyway. Yeah. So I bet you could have, once RouterOS 7 finally drops, you could load that on one of these guys, and you could probably get down into that same time frame with as many peers. Yeah, probably. So, well, I mean, to be honest with you, on these ASRs, that convergence time is probably more to do with the peering router sending me routes. Than it does my router at this point. Sure. Yeah. And I don't mean to say that the MikroTik should be better than the Cisco, but it's like Oh yeah. You could throw this brand new server together for a couple $1,000, brand new, and performance would be in the ballpark anyway. Yeah, comparable. Yeah, I bet you could. And for high SLA environments, and I'm sure there's detractors and people that would argue against it, but I like chassis-based systems because I can get 2 supervisors that are hitless, right? So one supervisor if the control plane fails on this thing, the other one seamlessly picks up. And in the Cisco world, I've had supervisors fail more than once, and I didn't drop a packet. nobody noticed. And so maintaining really, really strict SLAs on these controller-based routers chassis-based routers is much simpler, right? Like in the MikroTik world, there's just no control plane protection, right? So you'd have to have kind of two separated out routers. So if there was a failure, you'd feel a little hit. Now, it could be a hit where there's a little bit of packet loss for, 20, 30 seconds while there's convergence, but not a whole lot. So is that acceptable for most ISP environments? I would say 100%. Yeah, dude. Yeah, there's no issues like that. It's just, this is the environment I'm in. It's super stringent on the SLAs we hand out to people, and it's just, it's got to be as high as we could possibly get it. But I would say in 90% of networks, if you have two separate routers that have single control planes on them, you're probably still going to be great. If one fails, so be it.
Yeah, and I know that for the exchange, we used to run off some chassis switches because of the dual controller, and just got to the point where we had outgrown the performance of them, and we never had a problem where the controller was the issue. So we just went on.
Yeah, and I know these chassis. I'm building them for less than 25 grand a pop, and I know that sounds like a lot to a lot of people here listening, but if you look at the retail price of an ASR 9000, they're usually, closer to 150 grand a pop. So, getting one for 25 or less than 25 is actually, it's pretty good when you think about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, I'm not shopping for those often, but
yeah,
I know that the list price for one of the Cisco switches we have is like 30, and it's nowhere near what an ASR 9000 is. So I can only imagine what that would be new.
Man, I really like iOS XR. I know I've heard a lot of people, say it's not great for this or for that, but man, I love the commit interface, right? You put stuff in there and then you say commit and it'll actually attempt to apply them, things like that. So it's got really good rollback features and stuff. It's just, I don't know. I think they're just playing catch up to what everybody else has been doing for a while, but it's sure nice that they're getting there. Ugh. So I'm definitely not gonna complain about that, except for whenever you move in between regular iOS and iOS XR. In the XR stuff, you'll put a command in. You'll be like, why can't I ping this thing? It's because you forgot to type the word commit. So it's annoying for that respect, but normally it's pretty great.
But then, some people would say that, because you have to do the commit, that's why it's better.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's just...
Just got to remember. If you're old school, you got to put that stuff back in your head. All right, moving right along. Nicky B, which is his new Nick. I'm going to start calling him Nicky B, because it makes him sound like he's from the Spice Girls or something. He came up with an Ansible playbook to put run limits on Ubiquiti Kit. He said he's going to throw it up on GitHub or something like that, I think, pretty soon, so that you guys can kind of in an automated fashion push out rate limits to your, CPEs on Ubiquiti stuff, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm just going to mention that here. I know we don't have the link yet, but we'll have it soon, so be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, and I guess to go off on a bit of a... There's two tangents I'm going to go off onto from this point. One of them is the Ubiquiti management software still doesn't have this functionality built in. From what I've seen other people saying, I don't use it much, but UNMS and Air Control apparently are both missing the ability to do what Nick is doing via Ansible. You can do it on the units directly, which is why he can do it in Ansible. But it's like, usually the vendor's management system is supposed to be, a silo. It has everything you need or could possibly want, but only applies to their stuff. seems like a lot of the Ubiquity is doesn't have everything you need, and only applies to their stuff.
All right, tangent number 2.
But tangent number 2 is going off into the world of automation and stuff. On Nanog recently, there was, and I think you talked about it last cast about the route optimizer boxes.
Oh yeah.
Or at least talked about it in Slack quite a bit. And I just find it interesting that we have people that attack these route optimization boxes while simultaneously saying, automation, keep your hands off, let the machines do it, is the way of the future. And it's like, well, that's exactly what these boxes are doing. And you're saying did not use them, And I'm not saying specific people, but this general crowd of the, Nanog list elite, here's where we're going with automation and all these things, and, you should be doing all this stuff to make your life better and more precise. But not this one. It's just kind of a interesting situation. But no, I think that's probably the way to go for everything, is you get more of that automation stuff out there. Just because it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah. And the whole reason Mike jumped on this is we're talking about Ansible. That's an automation platform owned by Red Hat.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah. So that it can kind of, you build templates called playbooks, and it can push that out to stuff in a very easy manner. You can even build kind of graphical. I mean, it's got something called Ansible Tower, which is kind of a GUI web-based interface where you can kind of easily make these little templates that people can push different things out with and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. I think, I don't want to rehash all that stuff.
Sure.
But I think in that instance, most of the detractors I heard were saying it's not necessarily the optimizers themselves that they disliked, the automation aspect. It was that it manipulates routes. So what it'll generally do is it'll take like a /25 and it'll cut into 2/26s, right? Or a /20 will cut into 2/21s, and it'll advertise those with alternate destinations, right, to manipulate the flow of traffic. And so they don't like the idea of routes being manipulated inside of, if you don't own the route, you're not sourcing the route, you shouldn't be manipulating it, I think was kind of the source of that. Less the automation piece.
But as time went on, their position has definitely gotten a lot more nuanced as people, as should during a discussion of, someone brings a point and you refine your point, and because at the beginning it was all of these boxes are bad, and then it's, well, actually it's just this one company that does it this way. All the other companies do it a different way. So yeah, those guys are okay. These, it's just this guy. And it's just this guy because he does this one thing. But it started off as everybody's bad, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's just this one.
Yeah.
And kind of in that discussion, I was like, this is a very religious conversation. It's not very technical.
I know. That's the tricky part, right? I think scientific people will take in new information, they'll reevaluate what they thought, and they'll change their opinion. Sometimes, not always, right? Whereas some people, despite any evidence to the contrary, will continue to believe what they want to believe. And there's always going to be people out there in every facet of life, whether they're technical or religious or, political. So it's, it is what it is.
But I'm certainly looking at deploying a route optimization box at some point, just because the amount of benefit I could receive would be enormous for a lot of things. And it's like, well, but But it's just use it responsibly. If I can achieve what I want without using this one feature that the world hates, then I've accomplished that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I mean, there's definitely use cases where it absolutely makes sense. There's the cost savings, which does a lot of traffic manipulation, and for some people, their business wouldn't be nearly as profitable if they weren't using that feature and they're out optimized. Or there's people who, like me, use it for network resiliency, where it's forward-looking for failures and is really just reacting to that, right? And I couldn't as efficiently run my business otherwise. So there's definitely use cases.
Yeah, I know that part of yours is on the 100% SLA type thing, avoiding problems. Mm-hmm. But when you have a significant amount of the eyeballs out there, or your eyeball networks, I shouldn't say not eyeball networks because there are more. Say the top 20 eyeball networks that are very peculiar about their connectivity strategies.
Well, what's an eyeball network?
Well, a WISP is an eyeball network,
right? Because you have
Comcast is an eyeball. Yeah,
that want to actually look at the thing.
Yeah. So it's it's any end user, consumer, mass market service provider.
Right.
And they've got the eyeballs looking at the content,
mm-hmm.
and then the other side is content networks. Generally speaking, but large companies like the Comcast and whatnot have very peculiar routing choices. And so it may not be a thing of, somebody's trying to cheap out by buying Cogent and Hurricane and trying to work around carrier problems. No, for a lot of these providers, there is no provider that you can purchase, big transit provider that you can purchase that does not have that problem. Because, Comcast or AT&T or whomever, Verizon, they've got the people they peer with. Some of them don't have any transit they buy at all, and they kind of jack around with letting ports fill up and whatnot. So you gotta, and then they'll move it around so that people don't take advantage of, this port over here is free, so you'll use that one. I think it should be pretty standard for any content company to be using these kinds of platforms. Any data center should be using it because your customers want to get out to. It's not just the WISPs and other people that like to peer, because you're going to have a good connection to them no matter what. It's you're trying to feed your packets into Comcast and AT&T, and these boxes help work around those port capacity inadequacies.
Yeah, I think
much faster than you or I could sitting at a console.
I'm a big fan of automated intelligence, right? There's only so much information a human can consume and react to in a reasonable amount of time, and this helps you do that, right? And most of the time, whenever you run into issues like this, it's not a tiny problem. It's usually extremely impacting. It's hitting 40% of your traffic, and not gradually. It's 40% immediately, and now you've got widespread issues, and you're trying to trace this. And so the more you can automate that intelligence collecting and dissemination, and really figuring out and then add on top of that something that can automatically mitigate it for you, it becomes almost a no-brainer in those circumstances, right? If you just look at it from pure network protection, not even optimization, right? Not even just, but you're running any kind of a network, and a carrier is going to take a deuce and it's going to take you down for 6 hours, or and somewhere in there you're going to figure it out, and you're going to put that person in probation, you're going to mitigate the issue. Or instead of that, imagine you just get a notification that it detected this event and protected you. I mean, which would you prefer?
Oh yeah, and and it's not just you've lost your connection to your upstream router, and BGP just detects, oh, this connection is down, let's just stop using it. Routes are withdrawn. No, like the problem is like it's something else in their network that you're still getting advertised all the routes, or where your route's still being advertised out, and there's just a black hole somewhere where just all the packets are going to dev null.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you can't 100% trust BGP to do what it's supposed to do, right? Because there's issues, right? So even like you were saying, I've seen before where a carrier will have at a peering point between them and somebody else, say one of the content networks, they have 2 10 gig links, right? And those things run at 8 gigs a piece, and they're doing great. Well, then they'll have a failure on one of those links. Now they're trying to push 16 gigs of traffic through a 10 gig interface. What do you think is going to happen? Bad stuff, right? Well, the BGP session doesn't drop between those carriers. It's still advertising your routes. It still appears to be a valid route, coming to you. So BGP is still operating 100% the way it's supposed to, but you're getting significant packet loss. So you have to do something else, either manual intervention or something automated. And so I would just prefer an automated solution to problems like that. And that's not even talking about really route manipulation or anything like that. That's just network protection is all that is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said I wasn't going to beat that dead horse, and of course I flogged it thoroughly.
And set it on fire.
Yeah. And then sent it to the glue
set it on fire.
Yeah. So, Mike, you haven't been on a while, and you've been doing a lot of fiber research lately, and I've had some fiber stuff saved up, not a tremendous amount, so I figured we could kind of do a little fiber segment.
Sounds good.
Mike's Fiber Corner. It's got a lot of Metamucil over there. Let's see. One thing that we had come up with is people were talking about doing fiber terminations. So what's the most common way people do fiber terminations? I know when I first started in the data center industry, we would have a guy come in and he would puck and polish ends, so he would actually put in a little device and he would polish the end and then put it in the connector, and then he'd use glue on that joker, all that stuff. And then back in the day, I also used to see some mechanical splices, right, where it was a little contraption. You put it in and you turn this little crank and it would kind of lock the connector on the end of the fiber. And then you could maybe puck and polish, but not always. And now all I see people do anymore is they take pigtails or pre-terminated fiber connectors that have a tail coming off of various links, usually somewhere around a couple foot, and they will cut that to whatever length they want, and then they'll just fusion splice it on the end of the fiber. So no longer do you have to puck and polish. You don't have to worry about getting a perfect, rounded end on that fiber. You don't have to make sure that the glue is right in your connector and that you cure it. You don't have to do any of that crap anymore. You just put it in a fusion splicer, make sure you get a clean splice, then heat shrink that joker, and you're pretty much done. And then you go and eat lunch. I know it's also fairly inexpensive nowadays too, because you can get a set of pigtails off a fiber store for just pennies. It feels like. I know it's not really that cheap, but it's fairly inexpensive, and also the time to terminate is significantly less when you just fusion splice pigtails on. I mean, it used to take a guy per connector with a puck and polish. It used to take him, 4 or 5 minutes per at least. And now fusion splice, it's such a assembly line process. It seems like it takes 30 seconds per end or something like that.
And so I was recently looking into this because all I really worked with was just things that were pre-made. Now that I'm going into building my own plant, you're not going to have that luxury. And so I kind of assumed, going down the, let's just do fusion splice on the pigtail, but let's kind of see what everybody does. And that's what people are doing now. They're just buying a box of pigtails and just going to town with it. For all the reasons you had mentioned, it's just so much faster, it's cleaner. Something I haven't figured out though is how that connector gets on there in the first place.
Oh, at the factory, how are they assembling those?
Yeah, because a couple weeks ago, I had put out a request for video links. People send us links of how these cables are made, and we got links to a bunch of Cat 5 cables, and they've got machines that they're they plug it into it just clamps it down real quick versus a hand crimper, but it's just a factory in Asia somewhere where they're just doing the same things you do at home, just a whole bundle of them at a time.
Yeah.
There's nothing really special about it. So like, well then, how do they do the fibers? Is it just because the Asian, factory workers are so cheap that they are still just doing the just manual processes, or is there mechanization involved?
You know what's interesting is I saw recently, because I love industrial automation and stuff like that. It's weird, I know, but I saw this guy. He was talking about he's the only pinball manufacturer outside of the U.S. I think Midway is the one in the U.S. I can't remember 100%. Anyway, this guy, he's Australian based, but he does all his manufacturing in China. And he said, I don't do it in China because the labor is less expensive. He's like, actually, a lot of times it's more expensive now. He said that the labor force, one is more, what did he say? Like technically trained, and generally he's found they're faster to train on new processes and processes. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, but it's basically
things.
Time on turnaround to like train people on new stuff is better, and it seems to be kind of a more educated workforce on this kind of like on assembly and parts manufacturing, stuff like that. That I guess they've just been doing it in such high volumes for so long, they've gotten really good at it, and they may not necessarily be the cheapest, but at this point they're the most efficient on that stuff.
Yeah, and and part of that also is, imagine, there's a lot of the workforce elsewhere that's just gotten lazy. No, I don't want to learn new things. Like, I've heard of so many people that they retired because they didn't want to learn a new thing. It's like, your job still exists, just doing something else. Whereas in China, it's like, they're just always just learning new things. There's always something new to build.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. My mom, she's a registered nurse, and where she was working, they made this new policy where all registered nurses had to have a bachelor's degree by, I think, 2 years or something like that, or they were going to let them go. And so it really was a way to get rid of all of the older workforce that was making high salaries. Because a lot of them were like, you know what? Do I really want to like go to college now too, like remotely, even if I have to do that, or should I just retire? And just most of them retired. They're like, it's not worth it. So it was an easy way for them to cut costs by saying you got to have a bachelor's degree. I thought that was pretty brilliant.
Which I suppose this kind of is a nice segue into the next item, which was cheap splicers.
Yep.
And I had kind of had my eyes set on a couple of years ago. JJ had got like a splicer kit, an OTDR kit, some other stuff on AliExpress, and it's like, these specific ones are really great. So I was like, they're like $1,000.
Yeah, I think it's the Comshine ones, Komshine.
Okay.
And I know Cox got a Comshine as well, and I actually got to borrow it for a little while. And when I made that Fusion Splicer video, I had my friend Brandon, who has been doing fusion splicing for years. He's never used one of the inexpensive machines, but he looked at it and he knew exactly what to do with it. So we put some ends on and stuff like that, and it was pretty usable. And he was saying, for the price of these machines, like $1,000, and as many splices as you apparently get out of them, it makes more sense to buy those, and if they break, just throw them in the trash, one after another, than it is to buy the really big expensive ones.
Yeah, and so like that's the road I was going down. Was this, JJ says that this one's good, so I'll buy that one. Someone's already done the research as to which cheap one is good. Mm-hmm. Bam, I'll buy that. But then over the past 6 months, kind of getting more into the details on these things and thinking about time efficiencies and stuff. And there's now splicers that, because for when you're doing splicing, normally you take the fiber, you cut it, and I may have the steps wrong because I don't do it every day. Cut it, you strip the jacket off, you do some polishing, you do this, you slide the heat shrink, tube over it. Then you do the same thing on the other side, and then you lay it down into the machine. The machine does all the work, and then fuse them together, and then you gotta slide the heat shrink back over, and then it does that again to to mechanically hold it together, and then move on. Well, I've discovered that there are now fusion splicers where you just take the two raw ends, it has to be a single strand. You just lay two strands in there, and it does everything. Like, it will strip exactly what needs to be stripped. It does everything precisely what it needs.
Yeah, I've seen some too where it's almost like you put them in these two holders. You put it in the first stage, it'll do the thing. Then you move the holder to the next stage, and it'll do the thing. And you move it to the last holder. So it's just, you put it in this little like harness almost, and you just move it in the machine a couple of different. So one like strips it, one like cleaves it, the next one like does the splicing, and then the last one like does the heat shrink. And so you never have to like remove it from the holder. It just kind of does everything for you.
Yeah, and I haven't used one of those yet, but I'm just thinking that has to be so much more precise. You have to get better splices because it's not just I've cut too much off. And granted, as you get better, experience, you can do better things. But it's like,
process, yeah.
But I mean, to be able to just lay the strands in there and the machine just does it. I mean, to me, that seems like you could then have two machines and then be doing two of them at the same time. Versus you having to manually cleave, and like, it just seems like you could do it faster, more predictably.
It seems like training on new techs would be a lot easier as well, right? You're going to get people up to speed so much quicker if it's kind of streamlined like that too. I thought about that too, right? And so what's your time and energy worth, because you got to put it down into dollars usually for that kind of thing, right? If you're looking at a machine that's $1,000 or a machine that's $3,000, if the one makes you much more efficient, then, and it's, for me, it really comes down to consistency. What can I get the better result with the fastest, and I really want to put my money towards something like that, even if it's, an extra $1,000. It really seems worth it in the end.
It's well, and so like I think the one I was looking at was like $7,000 or $8,000. It was like way more than these. But I'm like, but think about it. What does it cost for a splicer guy for a year? A lot more than $6,000.
Yeah.
So like, if I can get double the work out of him by that, get that much more, or I just get my splicing done that much more quickly and then move him on to other stuff. It's like, what, $6,000 investment to get, say, twice the productivity, assuming you get twice. I'm just making it up, but like that seems like an easy decision, even at $6,000. It's like, if you're paying a guy $5,000 a year, I suppose it's a different story. But the heck, just so I'm thinking I'm going to buy one of the expensive ones, and then maybe one or two of the cheap ones just to have something else.
All
but
right, big spender.
It's and like, and like I think I mentioned this before on some other at this past spring at the OSP Insight video. I'd always heard like how all these like proper fiber management and design platforms were always so expensive, and I come to find out that like for less than 250 endpoints on a project, it's like $5,000. I'm like, if you're building a fiber network, what is $5,000?
Yeah, it's
I mean, you're going to spend a couple $100,000 to spend $5,000 to have it designed and documented correctly. Okay, done. Like, quit messing with Excel files and Google Earth and all this stuff, and just a purpose-built platform. Same thing. It's like, if you're building tens or hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of fiber infrastructure, spend a couple $100,000 and get a tool that does it properly.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I mean, through my eyes, as far as the fusion work goes that we do, or that I find myself doing, it's maybe, man, I don't know, maybe like 100 splices a year, something like that. You know, it's really low volume. And then in a lot of our stuff too, you know, if I'm running it indoor and it's point A to point B, Fiberstore's got their armored indoor cable, and I can get it preterm in virtually any length with a pulling sock for, I mean, each cable is like an extra $25. So, you know, it's like the cost savings aren't there for me to even buy a fusion machine in that instance. You know, and if it's indoors, it should be pretty safe. Theoretically, right, I could get a break, some ding-dong, you know, could be in there repairing something and break my fiber, and I'd have to go in there and, you know, fusion all that crap back together.
Well, like, and I just think about, like, you know, in data center applications, is that, you know, the smallest smallest single mode you can get is 10 kilometers. In your data center, it's probably only a couple 100 meters across, you know, all the cable. So you can do a bad splice, and you're still going to have enough light to make it work.
Oh, yeah, because most of the stuff, it's active equipment inside the data center. It's not usually leaving a data center dark, you know, on dark fiber going to another thing. It's usually there's an active piece of something that's terminating the connection there. So, yeah, you're right. Most optics are like 2 kilometer to 10 kilometer minimum. So even with dirty fiber or bad splices or whatever, it's still going to work just fine.
But you know, once you get to the the outdoor world and you're doing GPON, and you know every dB matters because you've got the light split 30 ways, and you know now it starts to make a little bit more. You have to be a little bit more precise with it.
Yeah, and speaking of GPON, which is Gigabit Passive Optical Network, right, is where you have one SFP and it splits out to multiple strands of fibers through prisms and stuff like that to service kind of your fiber to the home stuff. Cox found a GPON calculator from Huawei, which is, I mean, obviously it's Huawei specific, but all the information is kind of vendor neutral, which is really nice.
Yet, if you're in the U.S., don't click on the link in the show notes, because someone's going to come get you.
Nah, nobody will get you. It might be behind their paywall by now, but it was publicly available before.
Yet, I'm going to register right now and see what it
looks like.
See what happens.
I had popped in before, and it was actually pretty cool. Also, Andrew Cox threw out a pretty good tip. So they've been buying a lot of fiber stuff in bulk, and I think enclosures and stuff like that too. And so what he did is he picked a couple of vendors and eventually got samples from each one of those, and then he put them through the ringer. I think they said that they took some of their enclosures and filled them up with water and let them sit just to see, you know, how they were going to react, were they going to leak, all kinds of things like that. And so he said, really, you can't just buy bulk blind. You got to get a little bit of kit from various people, test it out, develop a relationship with those guys, and then buy a ton of it, right? And so why would you go AliExpress, right? It's straight from China. Ali is kind of the middleman, keeping everybody honest, and you can usually save a ton of money on stuff like that. Good tip.
Yet, and like I was looking at like splice trays and stuff, or splice cases, and I was looking at like what it costs for the CommScope ones, and then like a Fiberstore, and it's like 6 times different, and I'm like, does anybody use the Fiberstore ones outdoors, like in a vault, in a handhole? A couple guys have been using it that way for a couple of years. Like, yeah, it is what it is. I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll just buy a whole bunch of Fiberstore.
Yeah, dude, just spray it with Flex Seal. You'll be fine.
Yeah, so I figured, I'll just get them from Fiberstore. You know, the nice thing about Fiberstore versus AliExpress is that, you know, there's a lot higher margin for support and things like that.
Yeah, they have warehouses in the U.S. and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you know, it's not to say as time goes on, and I don't have quite a time crunch, where I could, you know, just go to AliExpress. Let's just buy 5 of everything and then see what happens. And now it's like, well, I need to get it done.
Mm-hmm. So also something that was galaxy brain for me, but is obvious when you think about it, is Danny sent a link for doing mid-span splices in fiber. It's like a YouTube link that shows you how. I mean, it's some manufacturer putting out the information, so it's specific to them, but I think the way they do it is pretty universal. And it's really interesting how you take a cable, right, a fixed cable that's running, and you don't actually cut it in between. You put it in this apparatus. You know, it's like a splice can. You feed it through there and strip it down, and then you can peel off a couple of tubes, and then or a tube or whatever you want, and then do splices mid-span, right? And then you can bring in a feeder cable into that, splice into that, and then so it's basically like tapping into fiber along the path. Which, I mean, looking in hindsight, I knew they had to do it somehow. I just didn't know how that actually functioned, because I was assuming it's like you don't just go in there and you snip the fiber in half, because then everybody would go down, right? If you did that, and then you got to splice everybody. So yeah, they go in there and they pick out individual strands or tubes and peel stuff off. So that's pretty cool to actually see that in action, kind of how they do some of that stuff.
It as a tangent, I've just tried to get into that Huawei Pond tool, and I'm getting you do not have the required permissions to perform this operation.
Snap, bro.
If your company is using Huawei product, upgrade your account to acquire more access rights.
That's lame. It used to be publicly available. I guess they got tired of people freely using their Pond tool. I think there is somebody else that has one as well, right? I know Ollie.
I'm sure there is.
I think Ollie has put together some kind of spreadsheet or Google Sheet, something like that, that helps him do calculations, right? So every time you do Prism, or, you know, like a splitter, or every time you do a splice or something like that, or you go into a bulkhead, you know, like you're doing connectors, there's some amount of loss associated with that, and you need to be able to get a certain amount of light towards the end. And I think also the number of clients you split it to, all that things, right? There's going to be an assumed amount of light loss and things like that. And so a calculator helps you figure out distance from splices, customers, all that stuff, and make sure you're within tolerances for all those things. So they're actually, you know, when you're thinking of pawn and like, how do I figure all this stuff out? There's actually calculators that help you do that. Wah, wah, wah. It's all very interesting.
I had something, and it's now out there somewhere.
Out floating in the ether. All right. Well, any other pearls of wisdom on this fiber stuff that you found?
I do suggest that you all do what you can to learn it and at least build something on a small scale. Most of the tools you can rent for a week. So, I mean, it's not the cheapest of let's go play with something that you could do, but, you know, rent a drill for a week, buy a few 100 feet of conduit and some fiber, and just find some place that you can just build something, just to do it once. So that you get your hands on everything. Because it's better to do that than like I was, and okay, we're just gonna build a couple small industrial parks off of some glass we're gonna IRU from somebody else. Oh, by the way, we're no longer on friendly terms with that other company, so we're gonna build it all. So instead of building like 10,000 feet of fiber, I'm now building 20 miles of fiber for my first project.
Surprise! Yeah.
So there's a lot of lessons to learn real quick.
Yeah. And you know what? There are a lot of guys that are free with information. Sometimes it's just hard to find them. They can.
If you want to find if there's somebody by you, comment on whatever post you've seen this on, and we will tag people that we know in your area, and or someone else can volunteer that they're doing it. There's several guys in the in the U.S. Joink probably the say Joink and Chuck McCown, probably the two biggest ones in the Wisp world, that are just come on by. Like Joink, they're constantly building. They have all these things you can watch the entire aspect from permitting all the way through putting drills in the ground and splicing. That's all going on all the time, and you can hang with them for a week. And I think they just ask you make like a $500 donation to like St. Jude's Hospital or something like that. That's all they ask.
I remember I went to the WISPA Fiber Friday one. Was it 2 years ago? Something like that? Maybe a year ago? I can't remember. It's been a little minute.
When you were at the WISPA show.
Yeah. There were a lot of a lot of people trying to get information, but there was a lot of people there giving information. So I remember, I think I was talking to Chuck Hogg, and he was saying, if you want, you can just come and hang out with us for a week. We'll take you on site. You can watch us drill. You can watch us terminate. I don't hear too many offers like that out in the business world, so it's pretty awesome. So that would maybe be another good resource. There's actually people that don't care. I guess so long as you're not right next door to them and trying to compete with them, they're free with information. So we could probably help make connections like that too.
Sure. I had remembered what had drifted off. As a part of this project, so when you're designing a fiber project or really any in-ground infrastructure, everyone knows that, not everyone, most people know that when you're doing the actual construction, you have to call your area's utility locate service to inform them that you're going to be building here, so they can get the other utilities to go mark where where their existing stuff is, so that you don't hit it. At least in Illinois, I assume something like this exists elsewhere, maybe not in your area, but you can call in with a design stage request, where everything's the same from their side as you're putting in a real digging ticket, except they just hit this is just a design box, and then the utilities send you, they aren't obligated to, but most of them will send you copies of their maps of what's in your area, for the intent of, okay, I see that there's a water main and phone and cable in the ground on this side of the street, and there's just electrical on this side. Well, I'm going to go with the place where there's less stuff to hit. Maybe that was a bad choice of utilities, but you get the point. Or a sewer, because the sewer is going to be 15 feet down in the ground. It's going to be a lot easier for you to work around it. Then again, it's a big... Anyway, I'm not going to keep giving details because someone's going to pick it apart. Anyway, so... it's good to kind of see where your competitors may be going. This way, they have to tell you pretty much where they are. But sometimes you get a little more information than they're required to supply. One of the utilities cable company sent, and then on there it shows if it's like for this cable company, it shows if it's fiber or if it's copper or what size of copper it is, and all their splices and nodes and things and node boundaries. And, you have to learn a ton about their infrastructure. But the nice thing is that I noticed, I saw in one spot, 1x4 DWDM mux. And I'm like, huh. So in this splice case, they just have like a little mux sitting there. That's kind of interesting. And then it says, channels, or ITU 20 to 23. So, okay, so now I know what channels are being used there. Not real beneficial. But then at customer locations, they'll have labeled, First National Bank, ITU 37. So, not that knowing what channel it is matters to you, but now you know that this bank has fiber service from this cable company. And so now you can go just call their sales desk. Hey, I want a quote for, 100 megs or a gig of internet, or a point to point, and now you know what they charge, so you just charge less.
Yeah, for sure.
And then because you can walk in, hey, I know you have Comcast, I know this is this, so here, give me your business.
That's that can give you a little bit of a competitive advantage for sure. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were talking about, I'm not sure how to price this thing. That's the best thing to do. Call around, ask all the competition what they're charging for whatever that service happens to be, and you don't have to be the cheapest, right? Always, but it can give you kind of a ballpark on what to look for.
Oh yeah, it's, and like I see WISPs fail at that constantly, where it's like, they'll have a gig circuit into their business for, I don't even know what it costs for a gig delivered. Let's just say $5,000, and then someone will come to them asking for like a 50 meg dedicated circuit, and they're trying to think, okay, well I'm paying a gig for $5,000. That's $5 a meg, so 50 megs, $250. So I don't know, maybe $500, something like that. I'm like, no. What would the phone company do? What would the cable company do? Are they selling them that 50 megs for, $3,000? Yeah. Well, then you sell it for $2,700. Don't sell it for just more than cost because you've made your money back. No. Figure just if you want the business, just do it for just a little bit cheaper than they are, and don't be afraid to call them or an aggregator type reseller company, and hey, what can I get? Don't do like your exact customer location, but just pick spots. And if you don't want to feel dirty, do it for your own site. So that way, if you find a really good deal, hey, I didn't know this. I didn't know that Zayo was over here. I'm bringing this 10 gig Zayo circuit now.
Yeah.
But
there was a circuit reseller, as you say, like an aggregator, a guy who's got a lot of people's fiber maps and a lot of connections and all that stuff. And before I've said, look, dude, I worked out a deal with him where it's like, look, I just want to get comps. I'm never going to buy service in these areas. But for each one of these, I'll ask you I'll pay you $40. He's like, all right, I don't care then. Because I just, I felt bad about stringing a guy along or whatever. But if you just ask him, like, hey, can I just pay you for this information? Let him do all the damn legwork, which is probably not that much for him. Everybody wins in that scenario. It only costs you a couple bucks, saved you a ton of time, and it might actually make you money because you've got good, valuable comps in the area that you can price your stuff against. Booyah. All right, Mike, we're over the hour mark. Everybody's asleep. Let's stick a fork in it.
Well, more importantly than that, I've been smelling dinner being cooked for like a half hour.
Good times.
So
yeah, I got to drive to Waco tonight, so I need to get on the road as well. All right, man. If people want to get a hold of you out on the internet, how would you have them do that?
I'd say probably the Brothers WISP Patreon. Go there. I say that mostly because that you can come into our community, ask your question, and then somebody else that is smarter than me, so they'll answer it before I will. And then I get to feel like I helped you without having to do anything.
All right. Good enough. I'm going to say you can send me an email, greg@gregsoul.com, if you like. That's one way of getting hold of me personally. I have a blog at gregsoul.com, which I'm more occasionally posting on and things like that. Also, you can grab me on Slack. Like Mike said, there's a lot of really smart people there, way smarter than me, that are answering questions way quicker than I can ever get to them. But if you want to hit me personally, you can always DM me on Slack. That is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Getting a hold of me is so easy for me to just pop in and answer stuff on there now, or ask other people questions for that matter. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/thebrotherswisp, signing up, and you will see an invite shortly thereafter. Any other questions or comments? Facebook is a good way of getting a hold of Mike. Contact us at thebrotherswisp.com is another way. Questions and comments, we'd love to see them. Please keep them coming. If you have any content you'd like us to talk more about, anything like that, please do it. If you have any interesting use cases or verticals you're in that you think people would be interested in hearing about, well, let us know.
We're also on Twitter. Don't forget that. Everything I queue up to be shared now goes on Facebook and Twitter. And actually, I get some interaction there. Usually it's the same few guys, but, it's another pipe to get our content.
There you go. I don't ever use the tweets. I don't do that stuff, so that's all Mikey.
Yet, other than stuff that we've got scheduled for my different companies or Brothers Wisp, I pretty much just use it to complain.
Huh. Like most things in life.
If some company has done something crappy, I'll tweet to them, knowing that they have some social media team that then is going to be on it versus trying to call in and get some guy that doesn't care. Because if you call in, then it's just you and the guy, and he doesn't care.
Yeah, you don't want to get
but
a
on
mic
Twitter,
on the phone. He doesn't
the
care.
whole world sees. And just more public shaming, but
Good
whatever.
times. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to the end. We will see you next time.
We talk about equipment
everybody.
and methodology,
See ya.
so sit back and start learning. Lighten up the tower so people can start searching. Shooting up the web in neighborhoods, net surfing. We got horrible jokes, we're loud and annoying, but we're informative facts, we're not disappointing. Just give us a listen, cause fun is the mission. I'm telling you, you don't know what you are missing. Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.